I'm joined now by the director of the Oxford Vaccine Group and chairperson of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, Professor Sir Andrew Pollard. Great to talk to you today, Sir Andrew. It's been an extraordinary 12 months, hasn't it, in the life of both COVID and the AstraZeneca vaccine. What have we learned?
Well, I think, as you say, it's been a quite extraordinary year that we've just been through from this time last year when we were just starting rollout of vaccines with a lot of uncertainty still about how long it would take to start to bring the pandemic under control. But I think on that day last year, I certainly felt that that was the beginning of the end of the pandemic. Clearly, as the year's gone on, we've seen the most remarkable rollout of vaccines, not just the Oxford vaccine, of all of them around the world, with now around 9 billion doses that have been distributed, and the most incredible impact on the pandemic. So that we're in a very much better place today than we were. We're today with very large numbers of cases in the community, but still very good control of severe disease as a result of vaccination. They've been extraordinary.
Are you worried that we're becoming a little complacent?
No, I don't think we are being complacent at all, actually. I mean, we're today in a situation where there's very good monitoring, much better than it was before globally, trying to understand how best to make sure that everyone in the world is protected as well as is possible. And now we're in this new period of transition to work out, now that there's very high levels of immunity in countries like ours, how do we transition to a situation where society is open and we maintain protection of the vulnerable in the population? And that is the programs that have been happening over the last few months, with third doses being given and trying to manage the number of cases so that the NHS is protected. But as we go forwards into the year ahead, working out better how to live with the virus is going to be the critical next step.
You mentioned the third dose. Well, of course, countries like Israel, they're already doing fourth doses. Do you foresee a position where we are going to be pretty much getting jabbed every 6 months or so?
Well, it's just not, from a global perspective, affordable, sustainable or deliverable to give fourth doses to everyone on the planet every 6 months. And remember that today, less than 10% of people in low-income countries have even had their first dose. So the whole idea of regular fourth doses globally is just not sensible. Now, it may be that as the science evolves, that we can work out who the most vulnerable are in populations and target future boosters to those individuals to maintain their protection. But for the vast majority of people who are vaccinated, the risk now is extremely low of severe COVID, those who've had 3 doses. And it's likely that we'll reach a point where we're focusing those booster doses on those who most need them. And of course, at this moment, we don't know what that looks like. Does that mean that we need updated vaccines each year like we do with flu? Can we just use the same vaccines for boosters? We need more data to make those decisions.
And in terms of those who haven't had vaccinations, there has been a lot of misinformation out there. How frustrating is it for you as a scientist who's been hugely involved in the science of vaccination all your life, to see some of the stuff that is repeated, usually online, and what impact do you think this has had? Has it actually caused people to die who might not have died?
Well, there's no doubt that anything which makes people uncertain or hesitant about being vaccinated, particularly those who are in vulnerable groups, that puts their life at risk. And we've definitely seen the effects of some parts of the commentary, some of the misinformation, which have had a major impact on people's confidence in vaccination. And so there's no doubt in my mind that during the course of the last year, some people will have died because of misinformation. And that just shows how critical it is. It's another type of virus that spreads very readily around the world.
Is there anything you would have done differently now looking back over the last 12 years? Because yes, you've been involved in vaccines all this time, but it's been unlike anything else in terms of the scale. Our major role in 2020 was in vaccine development. And I think the one thing that I would have liked to have been able to do differently would be to run much larger clinical trials. And we couldn't do that, partly because
the human resources required to do that we needed at the time. But largely just we didn't have the manufacturing capacity to make enough doses to run larger trials. And the reason why that's so important is if we could have done that, we may have had a vaccine a month or two earlier. And with 10,000 people dying every day at the end of 2020, it really shows you if you can just make a few weeks difference to shave off the time it takes to develop vaccines, you can save many lives around the world. And so I think that for me is the biggest thing, that if we were starting this again, would be to find ways of actually having more doses to run larger trials and get an answer quicker. During the course of the last year, I don't think that we should shy away from the problem that we've had from a global community perspective, which has been timely vaccination of vulnerable people everywhere. Millions of people have died during 2021 because they weren't vaccinated before they got disease. And many of those people died because they didn't have access to vaccines. So the equitable distribution of vaccines is the other thing which I think we really need to think about how to address, not just for future pandemics, but even today in this pandemic, to make sure that people are protected everywhere.
And in terms of new variants, because we have a vaccine, as it were, for COVID generally, do we need to be less concerned about new variants, or should we be as equally concerned? I mean, it does appear that Omicron is possibly not as serious for lots of people as Delta was, but there could be another one just around the corner tomorrow, couldn't there?
Well, it would be great if we're in a situation now where the costs to the virus of being able to spread, now that we're vaccinated, is that it causes less severe disease. That would be good. I don't think we can be sure at this moment that future versions of the coronavirus, the sons and daughters of Omicron, will be causing mild disease. So I think we do need more time to evaluate that, to understand exactly why Omicron seems to be causing milder disease. Is this a direction of travel that the virus has to go in order to survive in continuing infections? If indeed we do have ongoing problems with more severe disease, updated vaccines for the new variants may be one of the ways that we manage the living with the virus in the future.
Do you feel instinctively that we are over the worst of Omicron, perhaps? I don't want to be overly optimistic or put words in your mouth.
Well, I don't know with Omicron at the moment. I think, as the modelers have been saying in the media over the last few days, one of the real difficulties during this period is the type of mixing patterns of people over the holidays. Makes it very difficult to fully assess where we are. And I think that's going to become clear in the weeks ahead. I don't think we're completely over Omicron, certainly in the UK, but even less so in many other countries. And there's still some weeks for all of that to play out. But generally, the news is relatively good from an overall perspective, in that it does seem to be causing milder disease. But that doesn't mean that our health system, which is very much on the edge in normal times, is going to be able to cope with the increase in cases. And so I think we do still have to have measures in place that protect the health service during this winter.
What about, can I ask you about the Vaccine Manufacturing and Innovation Centre? This is a facility that creates and tests new vaccines. The government's looking at privatising that. Is that something you would welcome? Is that useful, or does that fill you with dismay?
Well, I think it's really important to have access to the manufacturing facilities that provide more opportunity for producing vaccines between pandemics and in pandemics, so that we're much better prepared for the future. Now, how that will work from an operational perspective, whether it's privatised or not, I don't know. So I think it sort of brings some uncertainty for us at this moment about what the operating model is. So I think we need to wait and see what that says.
Uncertainty is never especially useful, is it? Professor Sir Andrew Pollard, Director of the Oxford Vaccine Group, great to talk to you today. What an achievement, and we're just 12 months down the line from it. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.